They are just a little bit away from glory. 1. Soyuz 1, 1967. It begins like a victory lap waiting to happen. Night launch, Baikonur, April 23. Vladimir Komarov, decorated test pilot, close friend of Yuri Gagarin, rides Soyuz 1 on a mission that's supposed to rendezvous with Soyuz 2A the next day and prove the Soviet Union's new spaceship is ready for prime time. Within minutes, the script falls apart. One solar panel refuses to deploy, starving the spacecraft of power and physically blocking a star sensor. The attitude system hunts. The vehicle drifts. Komarov fights it by hand, and every correction burns precious fuel and battery. On the ground, controllers quietly scrub Soyuz 2. 3 other cosmonauts are saved by a no-go that never makes the headlines. Space isn't the villain here. Engineering and schedule pressure are. Komarov aims for an early return. He lines up the ship the old-fashioned way, by eyeballing the Earth's limb, because the automatic kit can't be trusted. Retro burn hits, blackout begins, descent looks nominal. Then the moment every parachute engineer has nightmares about. The drogue comes out, but the main canopy never blooms. He tries the manual release. The reserve tangles in the mess, now thrashing above the capsule. From the ground, you get cold telemetry and a tone in your headset that says descending, with no promise of landing. What follows is not a clean, heroic fade to black. It's a metal ball with a man inside dropping toward the step at a velocity no human body can negotiate. Impact near Orsk is catastrophic. The capsule ruptures and burns. Recovery teams find a crater, scorched wreckage, and the brutal, clinical fact that there was never a survivable second after that canopy failed. The post-mortem is as bleak as you'd expect. A compromised parachute system, design, manufacture, and verification stacked the odds. The reserve never had a chance once the main fouled. The myth says Komarov cursed the Politburo on the way down. The record says he stayed professional to the end. Either way, space didn't kill him. Gravity and a bad pack job did. His death forced hard changes, harsher ground testing, parachute redesigns, and a new respect, however reluctant, for engineers who say delay the launch. Soyuz would go on to become the most flown human spacecraft in history. But that reliability was paid for, in part, by a man who fell through a silent sky, with the right hardware stowed and the wrong hardware deployed. 2. Soyuz 11, the only 3 humans to die in vacuum, 1971. It should have been a victory lap. After 23 days aboard Salyut 1, the first space station, Georgy Dobrovolsky, Vladislav Volkov, and Viktor Petsayev buttoned up Soyuz 11 to come home national heroes. No pressure suits. The cabin was too tight for 3, and the program had decided risk management by optimism. Retrofire was clean, module separation started. Then the tiniest, dumbest villain in aerospace history did its thing. A pressure equalization valve, meant to crack open at low altitude to let fresh air in, popped during high-altitude separation. One bad timing glitch, a pyrotechnic kick, and the valve unseated at about 170 kilometers, where fresh air is a postcard. Cabin pressure began to plummet. No bang, no fireball, just a hiss and a gauge racing for 0. Physiology doesn't negotiate. In vacuum, you've got seconds. Moisture boils off your tongue, lungs try to vent like a punctured tire, blood oxygen dumps through the floor. Consciousness fades in 10 to 15 seconds. If you're lucky, you black out before panic can even pay rent. The telemetry later showed the capsule losing pressure to nil in under 2 minutes. Inside, Petsayev got his straps half loosened and clawed for the manual shutoff hidden behind a panel. He actually managed to turn it part way. It wasn't enough. Heartbeats slowed, then wandered, then stopped. 3 men dying cleanly and quietly in a pristine spacecraft that was doing everything else right. The descent module nailed its landing on the Kazakh steppe like a textbook return. Recovery crews jogged up expecting handshakes and a radio call to Moscow. They rapped the hatch, silence. When they cracked it, the scene punched the air out of the field team. All 3 cosmonauts slumped in their couches, straps still on, faces turned a dusky blue-gray. There was pink froth and trace bleeding at nose and ears, the calling cards of explosive decompression and hypoxia. Medics yanked them out and tried CPR on the dirt, because that's what you do when your brain can't accept what your eyes already know. It didn't matter. The cabin had been a vacuum for far too long. The investigation was as humiliating as it was precise. A valve opened when it shouldn't. The design made it too hard to reach and shut under stress. And the crew had no suits, because the program had crammed 3 bodies into a ship built for 2 in order to plan a bigger flag. The fixes were immediate and blunt. Soyuz flights went down to 2 people in full so-called pressure suits. The valve was re-engineered, the separation sequence detuned, the never again baked into checklists and hardware. 50-plus years later, their names still carry a nasty asterisk. The only humans to die in space itself, not during launch, not during re-entry, but in the silent, airless middle. Space only needed a thumb-sized valve, a bad vibration, and a minute of physics that doesn't care how many metals are waiting downrange. 3. Apollo 1, AS-204, a fire in a sealed box, 1967. January 27th, Cape Kennedy, Pad 34. It's supposed to be a boring plugs-out test, the Apollo command module on internal power. Crew in suits, comm checks, nothing leaves the pad. Inside are 3 A-list astronauts, Gus Grissom, Ed White, Roger Chaffee, strapped into a cabin stuffed with nylon netting, Velcro, wires on wires, and, because it's just a ground test, a pure oxygen atmosphere cranked above sea level pressure, a tinderbox with extra oxygen. What could go wrong? Plenty, and fast. The comm loops are noisy. The crew complains about an acrid smell, but the test limps on. Then, in an instant, an electrical arc under the left couch finds something that burns. Wire insulation, Velcro, suit fabric, take your pick. In high-pressure oxygen, burns becomes detonates. Fire runs like a fuse through the cabin. Chaffee calls it first. Calm. Clipped. We've got a fire in the cockpit. White wrestles for the hatch. Here's the design sin. The hatch opens inward and takes roughly a minute and a half to crack. On a good day, with no pressure spike. The fire superheats the air, pressure skyrockets. That hatch may as well be welded shut. What happens to the men is as ugly as it is quick. Flashover heat, toxic smoke, suits that turn from protection to fuel. The official finding is brutal in its simplicity. Death by asphyxia from inhaling superheated gases and combustion products with severe thermal injuries. No dramatic last words, no hero exit, just 3 pros trapped behind a door that physics won't let them open. Outside, pad crew batter themselves against the problem. Blistering heat, black smoke down to the floor, bolts that need tools, and air so foul you can't breathe. It takes several minutes to get the hatch off. By then, there's nothing left to save, only a scorched capsule and 3 men who never had a chance. The autopsies and the board pull no punches. A high-pressure, pure oxygen cabin, miles of flammable material, sloppy wiring and workmanship, a hatch designed for paperwork instead of panic, and rescue procedures that assume time they wouldn't have. The fixes read like a confession, mixed gas for ground tests, non-flammable beta cloth and Teflon, ruthless housekeeping of wires and Velcro, and an outward opening, blow-off in seconds hatch. Apollo got safer because 3 people died in the most preventable way imaginable, burned and smothered in a spacecraft that never left the pad. Space wasn't the killer that night. Complacency was. 4. Michael J. Adams, X-15, Flight 191, 1967. November 15th over the Mojave starts like every other X-15 day. A black rocket plane slung under a B-52, 1 man in a pressure suit, and a checklist that assumes nothing will blink at Mach 5. Michael J. Adams, Air Force test pilot, calm as granite, drops from the mothership, lights the engine, and knifes up on a ballistic arc. Target, an edge of space hop. He actually gets there, about 266,000 feet, high enough for an astronaut pin. That's the last win he gets. On the way down, gremlins wake up. An electrical burp corrupts the guidance. The adaptive flight control system starts helping in all the wrong ways. And the attitude displays lie just enough to matter. A tiny yaw at hypersonic speed, the kind you'd ignore in a T-38, mushrooms into a roll yaw coupling fistfight. Adams is suddenly flying a brick at Mach who the hell knows with the horizon somewhere it shouldn't be. He radios cool clipped calls. The airplane does not care. The X-15 tumbles. Yes, a hypersonic spin. The kind textbooks politely call not recommended. He claws out of the spin around 120,000 feet. victory for half a heartbeat, only to find himself inverted and steep, still screaming. Dynamic pressure piles on like a bar tab. At roughly 60,000 feet and near Mach 4, the loads go non-human. Huge negative G, then positive G spikes, the kind that turn blood to lead and vertebrae to chalk. The structure gives first. The X-15 comes apart in the cold blue, pieces fanning across the desert. There's no ejection at those speeds, no miracle parachute. Atoms, the end is instantaneous and violent. Crushing G's, catastrophic breakup, lights out before the wreckage ever meets the sand. The recovery teams find what test pilots' nightmares look like. Scorched shards, a dark scar on the Mojave, and the remains of a man who tried to outthink physics with a sick airplane. The board later lists the sins: electrical interference, misleading instruments, a control system that's saturated, a re-entry flown outside the safe box, and rewrites procedures and hardware in his wake. Posthumously, they pin the astronaut wings he earned on the way up. The truth on the way down is uglier. Space didn't kill Michael Adams. A bad stack of small failures did, and they hit all at once. At Mach 4, where there's no room to be wrong.